This course will get you certified in all the mentioned standards. This is part 2 of 4 parts. Part 1, we covered quality management system. Part 2, we are covering ISO 45001 and 14001, health, safety, and environment. If you follow everything we are demonstrating, you will pass stage 1 and stage 2 and sustain 0 findings and get certified for these standards. For food safety and FSCC or FSSC, you should check part 3 and part 4. And for integrated management system, to implement all the standards together, we have provided a checklist in part 4. And we are covering here specifically retail, supermarkets, and food service operations. For ISO 45001 and ISO 14001 HSE reality in retail and food service, retail and food service environments present unique health, safety, and environmental challenges. These operations are slip, trip, and fall environments with burn and cut risks. Operating in customer-facing spaces where incidents are immediately visible and reputationally damaging. Operational characteristics of retail and food service in relation to HSE. First characteristic is wet floors and high foot traffic creates constant slip hazards, requiring strict adherence to guidelines for floor maintenance and warning signage. Second characteristics are hot cooking equipment, open flames, and steam create burn risks, necessitating specific personal protective equipment, PPE, and safe work procedures. Third characteristics are sharp knives, slicers, and cutting equipments requiring comprehensive training and cut-resistant equipment where appropriate. Fourth characteristics are manual handling of stock, supplies, and equipment carries ergonomic risks, particularly during receiving and shelf stocking. Fourth or fifth characteristics are young and inexperienced workers, often employed, requiring enhanced supervision and training to meet safety standards. Sixth characteristics are high waste generation from food preparation and packaging, requiring compliance with environmental regulations and waste management standards. Seventh characteristics of HSE in retail and food service are cleaning chemical use in food preparation areas, necessitating strict controls to prevent contamination while maintaining hygiene. The key occupational health and safety for ISO 45001 in retail and food service operations, it faces specific occupational health and safety risks that must be systematically identified, assessed, and controlled. First, we have slips and falls from wet floors, from spills and cleaning, greasy surfaces in preparation area, uneven surfaces at entrances, trip hazards from boxes and equipment. Those are most common injury types in food service. And when it comes to cut and burns, knife injuries during food preparation, burns from hot oil, ovens, and steam equipments, contact with hot surfaces, and scalds from spills of hot liquids during services are the most common types of cut and burns in food service. For manual handling, you have lifting delivery boxes and stock, repetitive reaching and bending, awkward postures during cleaning, carrying heavy trays during service periods are the most common hazards for manual handling. For equipment use, you have slicers, grinders, and food processors, deep fryers and ovens, dishwashing machines, powered trolleys, and hand trucks in retail areas are the most common hazards from equipment use. And regarding young workers, you have inexperienced staff making errors, first-time workers unfamiliar with workplace hazards, limited understanding of food safety and hygiene requirements, and enhanced supervision is required to monitor and eliminate the hazards. And for ISO 45001, what auditors will verify? Auditors assess whether hazards identification and risk assessments reflect actual retail and food service operations, and whether controls function during real service conditions. Regarding hazard identification by task, which they assess, each task is assessed for specific risks, including food preparation tasks for cuts or burns, service tasks for slips or rushes, cleaning tasks for chemical exposure and falls. Each task assessed for specific risks. For training effectiveness, new starter inductions covered by hazards are also assessed for implementation and effectiveness. To confirm, refresher trainings are provided, competence are verified before unsupervised work, and training records are complete and current. For incident reporting culture, near misses are assessed if they are reported without blame, and all incidences are investigated and learning shared across shifts and locations, and corrective actions prevent recurrence. Those are the assessments that the auditors will assess to confirm the identification and risk assessment reflects actual retail and food service operations. Common failure patterns that you should notice to avoid, including training records exist, but the staff cannot explain hazards when interviewed, and procedures ignored during rush periods when managers are not present. Those are the common patterns that also the auditors will pay attention to confirm that you have managed effectively and eliminate. For ISO 14001 environmental aspects, retail and food service operations generate significant environmental aspects or impacts that must be identified, assessed, and controlled. Food waste must be identified, assessed, and controlled, including spoiled products from poor stock rotation, preparation waste from trimming and cooking, customer plate waste from service, and significant volume and disposal cost. And then for the packaging waste, cardboard from deliveries, plastic wrap and containers, disposable service items, takeaway packaging contributing to plastic waste also must be identified, assessed, and controlled. And energy use, including refrigeration running continuously, cooking equipment energy intensive, lighting and HVAC for customer areas, and peak demand during service periods also must be identified, assessed, and controlled. The environmental impact. An environmental impact also from water use, including food preparation and cooking, dishwashing and cleaning, customer facilities, significant consumptions in food service operations. Also, the environmental impact must be assessed, must be identified, assessed, and controlled. Then we have cleaning chemicals, from food safe sanitizers and detergents, potential for water cause contamination, storage and handling controls required, and disposal of chemical containers. All the significant environmental impacts for each must be identified, assessed, and controlled based on the regulations requirements. For ISO 14001 controls and compliance, the auditor's expectations include environmental controls must be operational and not aspirational. And auditors verify that waste segregation happens during busy periods and not just when convenient. The key controls that the auditors expect you to have, including waste segregation, to have bins clearly labeled, staff must be trained, and contamination must be minimized. Collection schedules also of the waste must be maintained, and record of waste collection and disposal quantities and disposal routes must also be kept. Legal awareness, auditors also requires you to have understanding of local waste generations, compliance with packaging regulations, awareness of chemical disposal restrictions, and permit for trade waste discharge where required. The other controls, operational control that the auditor expects you to have, including monitoring and targets of energy and water consumptions being tracked, waste reduction targets must be set, performance must be reviewed, and improvement initiatives must be implemented based on data. Another control, operational control, includes supplier engagement. Auditors expect you that working with suppliers to reduce packaging should be part of the operation, and sourcing decisions considered operational impact, and local sourcing where practical to reduce transport emissions. Now let's have an overview of the checklist for audit readiness, or the documents that you need, and then we will walk you through stage 1 and stage 2, step by step what happened, and also all the records you need to prepare for each stage and all the practices to maintain excellence. And this is a complete stage 1 and stage 2 preparation for retail and food service. We are going to highlight the area with class reference and stage 1 requirements, documentation, and stage 2 requirements, implementation evidence, and deliverable or audit focus. So we start with class 4 for ISO 45001 and 14001. The scope and context, class 4.1, understanding the organizational and its context. For stage 1 requirements, you need the documentation for context analysis, including occupational health and safety and environmental management system. And for stage 2 requirements, evidence, auditors will interview staff to confirm understanding of internal and external issues. Evidence of context analysis information informs risk assessment. That evidence of your context analysis inform risk assessment and operational planning. For example, adaptation to market trends and technology change, and observations of the operations during the stage 2 in line with contextual understanding. The deliverable or the audit focus here, the audit will focus on context analysis being completed within 12 months for both occupational health and safety and environmental management system, with practical application demonstrated. And then in the scope, and in class 4.2, understanding the need and expectation of interested parties. During stage 1, the document required to include interested parties registers for both occupational health and safety and environmental management system, and these are mandatory requirements. For stage 2 evidence, auditors will verify interactions interaction records with interested parties, for example, meeting minutes, feedback forms, communication logs. This will be conducted in stage 1 review, and also in stage 2, the auditor will verify that the staff demonstrate awareness of key interested parties and their relevant expectations. And then the auditor will observe in stage 2, will conduct the observation of operations addressing these expectations. The deliverables or audit focus here, audit will focus on interested parties being identified with their needs and expectations, documented and regularly reviewed for both occupational health and safety and environmental evidence of these being met or considered in practice. Then in class 4.3 for ISO 45001 and 14001, determining the scope of the occupational health and safety and environmental management system. Both are mandatory requirements to have scope statements, including both. Auditors will interview top management and relevant staff to confirm understanding of the system boundaries in stage 1, and then in stage 2, they will conduct observation of operational activities to ensure they fall within the defined scope and that aspects outside the scope are clearly delineated or outlined, and practical application of the scope in day-to-day decisions. Auditor will focus that the scope is current scope statement for each standard, and clearly defining boundaries and applicability approved by the top management and understood by relevant personnel. For class 4.4, management system, for both ISO 45001 and 14001, it requires process maps, including occupational health and safety and environmental management system showing interactions. Auditors will review those documents and observe process interactions. Then in second stage, they will interview staff to confirm their understanding of the processes and their interactions. And they will also ask for evidence of actual process outputs and records. And they will also observe that the staff follow procedures as outlined in the process map. The audit focus here is to verify that integrated process map showing how safety and environmental processes interact for retail and food service operations, demonstrating the management system structure and effective implementation. That is for scope and context class 4 for both standards. Now if we move to leadership class, which is class 5 for both standards 45,001 and 14,001, in class 5.1, leadership and commitment, you need to have both documents as evidence of top management review minutes and communication records, and those will be reviewed during the first audit, the first stage, audit stage. And then in the second stage, the auditor will interview staff for perception of leadership involvement and commitment, and also will conduct observations of leadership presence and actions during operations, especially during busy periods, and records of resource allocation decisions related to health and safety and environmental management system, and staff awareness of management's communication regarding policies and objectives. The audit focus or deliverable. Auditor will focus on top management activities or being active in system and evidenced by participation in review, resources allocations, decision, clear communication on policy and objectives, and staff perception of communication. Don't worry about the highlight. We will explain to you how to pass each later on. We're just showing you the checklist, each requirements on each stage, but later in the next slide, we will walk you through stage 1 and stage 2, exactly what happened and exactly what you need to do. Now, for class 4.2, requirement of policy, is a mandatory requirement to have both policies for occupational health and safety and environmental, or having a comprehensive policy covering both. And here, those policies will be reviewed during stage 1. And in stage 2, auditors might review, might interview staff at all levels to assess understanding of health and safety and environmental policies. And they will observe the operations of daily activities to see if they align with policy statements. They will also seek evidence of policy communications. They want to see posters or internet communication like emails or training records. Audit focus here is on both policies being approved by the top management and dated within the certification period and communicated to all relevant personnel and available to interested parties, with the staff demonstrating understanding and adherence. This will be the auditor's focus to confirm requirements for class 5.2 for policy. In class 5.3, it requires organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities. And during stage 1, the auditor will review the documents of responsibility matrices and job descriptions. For stage 2, the auditor will interview personnel at various levels to confirm understanding of their health and safety and environmental management system roles and responsibilities. They might also observe, or they will observe, tasks being performed to verify alignment with documentary responsibilities. And they will need evidence of delegated authorities being exercised as well. The auditor focus here in this class 5.3 is for responsibilities being assigned to named individuals with evidence of communication and understanding of their roles, particularly concerning health and safety and environment management, and to be demonstrated in practice. And the same class of leadership, class 5.4, it requires consultation and participation of workers, and here they will review the records of consultation procedures that you need to have, health and safety committee, charter, and meeting minutes. They need to review all these, so make sure you have all the documents and records to be reviewed in stage 1. All right. And then for stage 2, auditors will observe health and safety committee meeting, if possible, or review recent minutes to confirm active workers' participation. They will also interview workers to confirm awareness of consultation mechanisms and their ability to raise health and safety concerns without fear of reprisal. They will also look for evidence of workers' input in decision-making and hazard resolution. Auditors' focus here are on health and safety committees being established and representatives being elected as per WorkSafe New Zealand, for example, guidelines or your jurisdiction, and meeting schedule being defined and evidence of recent meetings and actions from workers' inputs with active workers' engagement. Then if we move to Class 6, planning, in Class 6.1, requirements for actions to address risks and opportunities for both the standards, auditors will review or will require the documents for the risk registers for occupational health and safety and environmental management system as well. And in Stage 2, auditors will review evidence of risk control, implementation, and effectiveness. And also staff interview to confirm awareness of significant risk and corresponding controls. Auditor will observe the controls in practice and records of opportunities being identified and realized. The auditor focus here for Class 6.1 are on risk being identified for each standard and opportunities being identified as well, and risk assessment methodologies being documented and applied consistently with evidence of effective control implementation. Then in Class 6.1.2 for ISO 45001 requirements of hazard identifications and assessment of risk and opportunities, the auditor would need records to review hazard identification procedure, and this is a mandatory requirement, and hazard register with risk assessment. During second stage, auditor will observe workplace for identified hazards and implemented controls. An auditor will interview staff regarding hazard awareness and use of controls, for example, proper manual handling or safe knife use or responding to spill hazards. An auditor will look for evidence of regular hazards inspections and updates to register. For example, in New Zealand, staff must demonstrate awareness of specific retail and food service hazards, including psychological hazards and controls aligning with WorkSafe New Zealand guidelines. The auditor focus here to meet Class 6.1.2 for ISO 14001 are on all retail and food service hazards being identified and risk assessments being completed and controls being identified based on regulatory requirement or regulatory principles. In New Zealand example will be HSWA 2015, and staff demonstrates understanding and application of controls. And for ISO 14001 Class 6.1.2 is for environmental aspects requirements. On Stage 1 audit, auditors will need documents of environmental aspect procedures, and those are mandatory requirements, and aspect register, and significance evaluation. Those are the documents that auditor need to review during Stage 1. On Stage 2, auditors will observe operational activities related to significant environmental aspects, for example, waste segregations and energy conservations and water usage. They will interview staff about environmental responsibilities and significance of various aspects, and they will look for evidence of life cycle perspective being considered in practice. For example, in New Zealand, staff should describe how activities comply with Resources Management Act of 1991 or local bylaw concerning waste, water, and emission. Auditors' focus here for ISO 14001 Clause 6.1.2 is on all activities being assessed for aspects and significance criteria being defined and significant aspects being identified and life cycle perspective being documented and applied and staff awareness of their impacts. And for both standards, ISO 45001 and ISO 14001 Clause 6.1.3, it requires the determination of legal requirements and other requirements. And here for stage 1, the auditor will need documents of legal registers for both standards for occupational health and safety and environmental management system, and those are mandatory requirements. So auditors need to review them during stage 1. And during stage 2, the auditor will review the evidence of compliance with legal requirements. For example, they will review the permits and licenses and inspections reports. And the auditor might or will interview staff responsible for legal compliance and observation of operations to verify adherence to legal requirements. For example, in New Zealand, staff must demonstrate access to an understanding of HSWA 2015, RMA 1991, HSNO Act of 1996, and Waste Minimization Act of 2008, and Local Council bylaw. Auditors' focus here for legal registers is to confirm that all applicable New Zealand laws are identified, or all applicable regulatory laws in your countries are identified, and compliance status are tracked, and permits or consents are identified and managed, and access to legal requirements are maintained, and verifiable compliance in operations. Also in ISO 45001 and 14001 Class 6.2, it requires occupational health and safety and environmental objectives and planning to achieve them. So during stage 1, the auditor needs documents to review the objectives for occupational health and safety and for environmental management system, and those are mandatory requirements, the objectives, and also action plans documents to be reviewed. Then during stage 2, auditor will review progress against objectives in action plans. Auditors will interview staff to confirm awareness of objectives relevant to their roles and how their work contributes. They will look for evidence of resources being allocated and used to achieve objectives. For example, in New Zealand, staff will discuss how their actions contribute to local health and safety and environmental performance improvement objectives. The auditor's focus here for objectives and action plan is to confirm that objectives are documented and are measurable and linked to policy and significant aspects and hazards and risks, and action plans are defined, and responsibilities are assigned, and resources are allocated, and deadlines are set, and progress is actively being monitored. That is for Clause 6. For Clause 5, support, for Clause 7 support, for ISO 14001 and ISO 45001 Clause 7.2, requirement for competence, the auditor during stage 1 will need the records of the competence matrices for occupational health and safety and environmental management system and training records to be reviewed. And then during stage 2, the auditor will interview staff to assess their competence for tasks impacting health and safety and environmental management system. And auditors also will observe staff performing tasks to verify skill and knowledge. An auditor will look for evidence of training effectiveness, for example, post-training assessment records or supervisor feedback. For instance, in New Zealand context, staff must demonstrate specific training for HSWA requirements and environmental best practices relevant to their roles. Here, the auditor focus for clause 7.2 for competence requirements. The auditor need to confirm that competence requirements are defined for all roles affecting safety and environmental management system, and training needs being identified and training being provided, with records being maintained, and the staff must demonstrate required competence. And for clause 7.5 for both standards, which requires documented information, during stage 1, the auditor will need documents to review the document control procedure and record control procedure and document master list to meet clause 7.5. And then during stage 2, the auditor will observe staff accessing and using documented information, for example, SOPs and policies, and evidence of proper record keeping and version control and data protection in practice. Auditor will interview staff regarding documents access and retention and practical adherence to data retention standards. For example, in New Zealand context, staff must confirm adherence to New Zealand data retention standards and privacy regulations and accessibility for employees. The auditor focus here to meet clause 7.5, which requires documented information. They need evidence to confirm that documented information are controlled, including approval and version control and distribution and protection, and retention periods being defined and records being identified and maintained as evidence of conformity, with both staff effectively using and managing information. That is for clause 7. Now for clause 8, operations. For both for the standard of ISO 45001, clause 8.1, which requires operational planning and control, you need documents for auditors' review of occupational health and safety operational controls, for example, SWPs or permit to work, and procurement procedures. During stage 2, auditors observe implementation of occupational health and safety operational controls, for example, use of PPE and adherence to SWPs and equipment checks, and interviews of staff about control effectiveness and their involvement in management change, and evidence. The auditor will look for evidence of procurement process, including health and safety criteria. Example, in New Zealand, staff must demonstrate adherence to WorkSafe New Zealand expectations for managing day-to-day health and safety risks, including contractor management and design of workplace. To meet clause 8.1 requirement for ISO 45001, the auditor is focusing on controls being documented for significant hazards and standards operating procedures in place and processes for managing change and procurement being documented and implemented as well and observed to be effective. And for clause 8.2 for ISO 45001, which requires emergency preparedness and response, this is a mandatory requirement for occupational health and safety. During stage 1, the auditor need to review emergency response plans and drill records. And then during stage 2, the auditor will review recent drill records and interview staff on emergency procedures and their roles, and observe an observation of emergency equipment and signage, An auditor will need evidence of corrective actions from drills being implemented. For example, in New Zealand context, staff must demonstrate knowledge of emergency procedures for a specific New Zealand risk like earthquake or tsunami and explain their roles. Auditor focus for ISO 45001 to meet Clause 8.2 requirements are on emergency procedures for fire, earthquake, injury, customer incident being documented, and drill schedules being defined and evidence of regular drills and review of effectiveness to reflect regulatory specific risks with the staff competence being demonstrated. Now for ISO 14001, Clause 8.1 Operational Planning and Controls requirements, the auditor needs to review the documents during stage 1 of environmental operational control, for example, waste management plans and emergency energy conservation procedures. And during stage 2, the auditor will observe implementation of environmental control operational controls, for example, waste segregation, energy saving practices, and chemical storage. And the auditor will interview staff about environmental responsibilities and awareness of controls. And auditors also will look for evidence of procurement processes, including environmental criteria. For example, in New Zealand context, staff must demonstrate adherence to EPA and regional council guidelines for managing waste, water, and energy use. The auditor focus here for ISO 14001 to meet the requirement of Clause 8.1 are on controls being documented for significant aspects and standards operating procedures in place and processes for managing change and procurement being documented and implemented, and the auditor will observe the effectiveness in practice. Also for ISO 14001, Clause 8.2, requirement for emergency preparedness and response, this is a mandatory requirement, and the auditor need to review during stage 1 environmental emergency response plan and drill records. An auditor need during stage 2, auditor will review recent drill records for environmental emergencies, for example, a spill drill, and interview staff on environmental emergency procedures and their roles. An auditor will observe spill kits and emergency response equipment and evidence of corrective actions from drills. For example, in New Zealand context, staff must demonstrate knowledge of procedures for environmental incidents in New Zealand, reflecting local environmental context. An auditor focus here to meet the requirement of ISO 14001 Clause 8.2, auditor will focus on emergency procedures for spill or for leak being documented, and drill schedule being defined, and evidence of regular drills and review of effectiveness, reflecting national environmental context with the staff competence being demonstrated. That is Clause 8 for both standards. And now moving to Clause 9 for performance evaluations. For both clauses, ISO 45001 and ISO 14001, Clause 9.1 requires monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. And during stage 1, the auditor needs to review the records of monitoring planning for occupational health and safety and environmental management and performance data. And then during stage 2, the auditor will review actual performance data, for example, including incident rates, waste volume, energy consumption, and evidence of analysis. The auditor will interview staff responsible for monitoring and observation of measurement points and data collection processes. For example, in New Zealand context, monitoring includes relevant WorkSafe New Zealand and environmental indicators, with data being analyzed for trends and improvements. For both the standards requirements in Clause 9.1, the auditor will focus on performance indicators being defined for each standards, and monitoring methods being defined, and analysis methods being defined, and regular evaluation of performance being conducted and used for decision making. And for Clause 9.2.1, for both standards, requires evaluation of compliance. And during stage 1, the auditor will need documents to confirm the compliance evaluation procedures, which are mandatory requirements for both standards, and compliance records. Then during stage 2, the auditor will review recent compliance evaluation reports and evidence of follow-up on non-compliance. The auditor will interview staff responsible for compliance and will observe operational compliance with legal requirements. For example, in New Zealand context again, compliance is required specifically to be checked against New Zealand legal requirements, including HSWA 2015 and RMA 1991, with evidence of conformity. The auditor's focus here to meet Clause 9.1.2 for evaluation of compliance for both standards. The auditor is focusing on compliance evaluation frequency being defined, and methodology being documented, and responsibility being assigned, and records of compliance evaluations being maintained and showing proactive adherence. And in Clause 9.2 for both standards, it requires internal audit. And the auditor will review the documents for internal audit procedures for both, which are mandatory requirements for Occupational Health and Safety and Environmental Management System, and audit program documents and schedules and audit reports. That's during stage 1. Then during stage 2, the auditor will review recent internal audit reports, particularly focusing on corrective actions and their implementation. Auditors also will interview internal auditors for competence and impartiality. The auditor will observe areas previously audited to verify improvements. Example, in New Zealand context, audit programs must cover all the New Zealand standards, and auditors must demonstrate awareness of WorkSafe New Zealand guidelines and local operational contexts. Auditors focus to meet the requirement of Clause 9.2 for internal audit for both standards, Occupational Health and Safety and Environmental Management System. The auditor will focus on audit programs covering all the requirements of both standards annually, and will focus on auditor competence requirements being defined. An audit is scheduled for the next 12 months, and audit reports with findings and corrective actions showing effective system review. For the requirement of Clause 9.3 for both standards, it requires management review for Occupational Health and Safety and Environmental Management System. During stage 1, the auditor needs records and documents and to review management review procedure is mandatory requirement for both standards, and management review schedule and management review minutes. Those need to be available for review during stage 1. Then during stage 2, the auditor will review management review minutes for decisions made and actions assigned, and the auditor will verify their implementation and interview top management about review inputs and outputs and evidence of resources allocation and implementation decisions being enacted. The auditors focus to meet the requirement of clause 9.3 of management review for both standards. Auditors focus on management review frequency being defined, minimum to be conducted annually, and requires input being defined for each standard, and review being scheduled, and records of management review decisions and actions being maintained with verifiable follow-up or follow-through. That is clause 9 for both standards. And now moving to clause 10, improvement. Both the standard ISO 45001 and 14001 clause 9.2 requires incidents and nonconformity and corrective actions being managed. And during stage 1, the auditor will need to review the documents of corrective actions procedures, and those procedures are mandatory for both standards, and incident reports and nonconformity reports as well. Then during stage 2, the auditor will review incident or nonconformity reports, focusing on root cause analysis and the effectiveness of corrective actions being implemented. The auditor will interview staff involved in incident reporting and investigation and observation of change made as results of corrective actions. The auditor focus here are on corrective actions processes being documented with identifications and root cause analysis and actions and verifications and system updates and records of incident and nonconformities and their resolutions, and demonstrating effective learning and improvement. So during stage 1 here, or during stage 2, the auditor also will observe hazard control implementation, for example, proper use of machinery guards and staff access routes and PPE usage, and records of regular checks and maintenance of staff equipment, and interview staff on emergency procedures and evidence of staff awareness and adherence to safe practices during busy service periods. Auditors here is focusing on hazard control measures being consistently applied and effective during all operational period, and the staff can articulate the staff safe work practices. And also during stage 2, the auditor will review environmental monitoring data, including waste diversion rates and utilities consumptions. An auditor will observe waste management practices and energy efficiency measures and proper chemical handling, and interview staff about environmental responsibilities and how reports spill or incidents to report spill or incidents. Auditors here is focusing on environmental monitoring data actively being collected and reviewed, and staff must demonstrate commitment to environmental protection in daily tasks. Also, for staff awareness and competence, the auditor in stage 1 will review the documents of training needs, analysis, and training records. And then in stage 2, the auditor will conduct interview with a cross-section of staff to assess their understanding of key hazards and environmental aspects and company policies and their individual health and safety and environmental management system responsibilities. And the staff must demonstrate ability to intervene in unsafe act or address environmental concern. Auditors focus here on all staff to articulate key hazards, environmental aspects, and their H&S and EMS roles, and demonstrating practical competence. Also, during stage 1, the auditor will need to review the documents of emergency response plans and drill schedules. And here, In stage 2, also the auditor will review drill records and observe emergency equipment and interview staff regarding their roles and responsibilities during various emergency scenarios and evidence of continuous improvement based on drill outcomes and staff demonstrating confidence in emergency response. The auditor focus here is on regular emergency drills being conducted and records being maintained, and the staff demonstrate effective response capability. During stage 1 also, the auditor will review the documents of incident reporting procedures and investigation records. Then on stage 2, the auditor will review recent incident investigation records to verify root cause analysis and effectiveness of corrective actions. And the auditor will interview staff involved in reporting and investigation to confirm process understanding and observation of improvement made to prevent recurrence. The auditor's focus here are on incidents being promptly reported and thoroughly investigated and effective corrective actions being implemented to prevent recurrence. Regarding compliance assurance, the auditor during first audit will review the records of compliance evaluation procedures and legal register. And then on stage 2, the auditor will review records of compliance evaluations and any identified nonconformities, along with actions taken and interview relevance to personnel to understand the compliance evaluation process and its frequency, and evidence that legal requirements are actively monitored and adherence to. The focus of the auditor here are on regular compliance evaluations being conducted and demonstrating ongoing adherence to legal and other requirements. Now let's look at the common audit readiness checklist, the complete checklist that you can use to be ready for stage 1. Scope statements must be approved and current for both standards with the staff understanding, and occupational health and safety and environmental policies must be approved by the top management and communicated and understood by all relevant staff, and all mandatory procedures must be documented and actively implemented in daily operations. And legal registers must be current and complete, including all applicable legislations and regulations in your country, with demonstrable compliance. In New Zealand context, that means the legal registers must be current and complete, and also adhering to HSWA 2015, RMA 1991, HSNO Act of 1996, and Waste Minimization Act of 2008. And also, part of your checklist, hazard register must be complete for ISO 45001, aligning with your regulations. For example, in New Zealand, must be aligned with WorkSafe, and controls actively being implemented and observed. So you need the records, the controls, and the hazard register to be complete. Also, part of your checklist, your environmental aspect register must be complete with significant evaluation for ISO 14001 and aligning with your local regulations and regional council and aspects are managed in practice. And also ensure that objectives are set and measurable with action plans showing progress and resources allocation. Ensure that internal audit programs are established and actively conducted with findings addressed and improvements verified. Ensure that management reviews are scheduled, conducted, and decisions implemented effectively. Also, Just wait. I need to pick up some call and I will get back to you. So these are part of the checklist. Also, you should have environmental aspect register being complete with significant evaluation. This relation to ISO 14001 aligning with EPA and regional council rules and aspects are managed in practice. As well, you should have all objectives set and measurable with action plans showing progress and resources allocation. And you should have internal audit program established and actively conducted with findings addressed and improvements verified. You also need to have management review being scheduled, conducted, and decisions implemented effectively. Then you need to have competence requirements being defined, training provided, and staff demonstrate required knowledge and skills. And workers, consultations mechanism being established for ISO 14001 and actively used with evidence of worker participations and feedback. Also, you need to have emergency response plans being documented, drills regularly conducted, and staff are competent in responding to emergencies. And you need to have no major gaps in documentation or implementation evidence. And your auditors can confirm overall system readiness for stage 2 in retail and food service sectors based on both documentation and observed practice. And the staff are knowledgeable about key hazards, environmental aspects, policies, and their health and safety or environmental management system responsibilities. And operational controls are consistently observed, functioning effectively during service periods, and environmental monitoring data is regularly collected, analyzed, and used for improvement. And incident investigation records demonstrate thorough root cause analysis and effective corrective actions. Now, this is a complete guide that you need to pass stage 1. All right. What is stage 1 really like for ISO 14001 and ISO 45001? Stage 1 assesses whether your occupational health and safety and environmental management systems documentation is complete, logical, and ready for operational verifications. For retail and food service, this means proving your systems address real workplace hazards, including slips, burns, knife injuries, customer aggressions, and environmental impacts, food waste, energy, water, packaging, and not generic office risks. The timeline and logistics you need for stage 1, it might take you 1 to 2 days depending on organizational size and scope. And location typically is conducted at head office or main site. Participant requires here, including top management, HSE coordinator, operational managers, and H&S committee representatives. Documentation requires, including all OH&S and EMS documentation available for review. What auditors will review here, hourly by hour. First, you start with opening meeting that will last around 30 minutes. During opening meeting, auditors will explain stage 1 purpose and dual standards approach, and management present organizational overview and confirm scope accuracy for both standards. Example, in New Zealand context, it will confirm all New Zealand locations are included. WorkSafe New Zealand and regional council jurisdictions are also identified during the opening meeting. So how to pass this meeting? First, you need occupational health and safety policy mentions workers' consultation, hazards eliminations and or minimizations, legal compliance, and continual improvement. Then you need environmental policy monitoring, pollution preventions, resources efficiency, legal compliance, and continual improvement. Then you need both policies signed by CEO or general manager, dated with certification period, and your policies must be displayed in staff areas, including in inductions, and responsibilities matrix shows who is responsible for each HSE element. An HSE committee charter exists with meeting schedule and workers' representatives elected as per WorkSafe New Zealand guidelines for New Zealand operations, but you can tailor that to your jurisdictions, and evidence of recent Health and Safety Committee meeting within the last 3 months. That's how you pass that. And then in a scope and context review will take you around 1 to 2 hours. Auditors will check in scope and context review. They will check a scope statement. Do they really accurately describe retail and food service operations? They will check context analysis. Have you identified workers' safety concerns, environmental obligations, and community expectations? They will also check interested parties, our WorkSafe New Zealand and EPA, a regional council, and a staff union and local community are identified. Now, in this context, you should tailor it to your own interested parties and regulations and jurisdictions and requirements in your own country. And also the process map. So during scope and context, they will review scope statement, context analysis, interested parties, and process map. For the process map, they will check if does it show how safety and environmental aspects interact with operations. So how to pass the scope and context review? You need your occupational health and safety scope must describe actual work activities from food preparation, customer service, and manual deadlines and cleaning. And then environmental scope must describe actual environmental impacts such as waste generations, energy use, and refrigerant emissions. And context analysis must be completed within the last 12 months with evidence of management review. And interested parties register must show who they are, what they expect, and how you address it. And process map must show where hazards occur and environmental impacts are generated. For example, in New Zealand context, the reference must include HSWA 2015, RMA 1991, and HSNO Act of 1996 in context. But in this example, you need to include based on your location, your jurisdictions, and regulations. For leadership review, will take around 1 hour. What will they check here? The auditor will check your health and occupational health and safety policy. Does it reflect commitment to workers' participation, injury prevention, and legal compliance? They will also check environmental policy. Does it reflect commitment to pollution prevention, legal compliance, and continuous improvement? And they will also check are policies approved, dated, and communicated to all workers. And responsibilities metrics also will be checked. Are HSE role clearly assigned? And workers' consultations will be checked. Is there evidence of health and safety committee or workers' representatives? So this all will take place during leadership review. And how to pass this? Your occupational health and safety policy must mention workers' consultation and hazard eliminations or minimization with legal compliance and continual improvement. And environmental policy must mention pollution prevention and resources efficiency and legal compliance and continual improvement. So those are the same points that you made earlier. And also both policies must be signed by general manager and CEO and dated with certification period. And policies must be displayed in the staff areas, including in induction. And responsibilities matrix shows who is responsible for each HSE element. And Health and Safety Committee charter exists with meeting schedule and workers' representatives elected as per WorkSafe New Zealand guidelines for New Zealand operations, but you can tailor this to your jurisdiction. And evidence of recent HSE Health and Safety Committee meeting within the last 3 months. So if you look here, let me show you. If you look from scope and context, all right, to leadership review, you have many common themes here and elements where can cover both. Now for planning review, first for hazards, it's specific for ISO 45001. It will take around 2 hours. The auditors will check hazards identification procedure. Does it cover all workers' activities? And hazards register are retailers or food service specific hazards identified. And risk assessment, are they complete with control identified? And they will check hierarchy of control. Is it applied correctly? So in planning review, when they are reviewing the hazards, the auditor will check hazard identification procedure and hazard register and risk assessment and hierarchy of control. In order to pass this planning review for hazards, first your hazard identification procedure must describe how hazards are identified, such as workplace inspection or through incident report or workers' feedback or task analysis or all. And also your hazard register must include all retail and food service hazards, such as slip, trips, and falls, wet floor and cluttered walkways, and manual handling, such as lifting stock and moving equipment, and hard surfaces and equipment, including oven, fryers, and hot plates, and knife injury, including food preparation, during food preparation, and chemical exposure with cleaning products, and workers and working in cold environment like cold room and freezers, and working in hard environment like kitchens and during peak services, and customer aggression and violence, and repetitive strain injuries like workout, check out scanning and food preparation, and working at heights, accessing high shelves. And then also each hazard has risk assessment showing likelihood, consequences, and risk rating, and controls must be identified using hierarchy. Either first you prioritize elimination, if not then substitution, if not then engineering, if not then administrative, if not then PPE. All right, example, New Zealand context risk assessment will be referenced to HSWA 2015 and WorkSafe New Zealand guidelines. Then you will move to planning review for environmental aspects specific to ISO 14001 and will take 2 hours as well. The auditors here will check environmental aspect procedures. Does it cover all activities? And aspects register are retail or food service specific aspects identified, and significance evaluation. Is there clear criteria for determining significance? And life cycle perspective, have you considered upstream and downstream impacts? So how to pass this here? Environmental aspects procedures must describe how aspects are identified, including process analysis, site inspection, or data review, An aspect register must include all retail and food service environmental aspects, including electricity consumption with refrigeration and lighting and cooking equipment, and wet usage from cleaning, food preparation, and customer facilities, and food waste generation through preparation waste, expired product, and customer waste, and packing waste from cardboard and plastic and polyester, and refrigerant emissions from cooling systems, and cooking emissions from smoke and other and grease, and wastewater discharge from cleaning and food preparation, and chemical and cleaning chemical use and disposal, and fuel consumption, including delivery vehicle if in scope. Then also your significance criteria must be defined, for example, with the volume, frequency, and legal requirements and stakeholders concerned. And significant aspects must clearly be identified, and life cycle perspective must be documented, for example, packaging from suppliers and waste to landfill. All right, for example, in New Zealand context, aspect assessment considers RMA 1991 and regional council rules and EPA requirements. Then you move to planning review. Legal compliance, both standards will take around 1 to 2 hours. The auditors here will check legal registers. All applicable laws must be identified for both occupational health and safety and environment. And compliance status, how do you track compliance, and permit and consent, are they identified and current? So how to pass here? First, Occupational Health and Safety Legal Register include all applicable New Zealand laws. Health and Safety at Work Act 2015, and for example, but actually to pass, you need Occupational Health and Safety Legal Register including all applicable your country's laws. And now here I'm listing based on New Zealand, but you can list based on where you are. In case of New Zealand, it must include Health and Safety at Work Act of 2015, Health and Safety at Work, General Risk and Workplace Management Regulations of 2016, and relevant Work Safe New Zealand approved code of practice and industry-specific regulations. And then also your environmental legal register must include all applicable laws in your country. In New Zealand context, must include Resources Management Act of 1991, Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act of 1996, and Waste Management Act of 2008, and Climate Change Response Act of 2002, and Regional Council Rules and Bylaws, and District Council Bylaw. Then your legal registers must be updated within the last 6 months, and compliance status must be tracked for each equipment, and permit or consent must be identified, for example, discharge consent or hazardous substance approvals. For example, in New Zealand context, all permits from EPA and regional councils must be identified with expiry dates. Then you will move to planning review with objectives for both the standards. It will take around 1 hour. Here the auditors will check occupational health and safety objectives. Are they SMART and linked to hazard and risks? An environmental objective, are they SMART and linked to significant aspects? An action plan here, who conducted the action, what did they do, and when was it, and how the measurement of the outcome also will be reviewed. To pass this planning and review of the objectives, first your health and safety objectives must be measurable. For example, to reduce slip trips injury by 30% by December 2026, for example, or achieve 100% completion of hazards inspections monthly. And for environmental objectives also must be measurable. For example, reduce food waste by 20% by June 2026 or reduce electricity consumption by 15% by December 2026. And each objective must be linked to significant hazards or environmental aspect. An action plan shows a specific action, responsible person, deadline, and resources required. And your objectives must be approved by management. And then you move to support review. That will take around 1 to 2 hours. Auditors here will check the competence. Have you defined HSE competence requirements for each role? And training records also. Evidence of HSE training delivery and documented control. How do you ensure current HSE comments are used? And communication. How do you communicate HSE information to workers? Those are what auditors will check for the support. To pass the support review, you need competence metrics for all the roles with HSE responsibilities, including managers, supervisors, H&S committee members, and first aiders and fire wardens. HSE training needs must be identified, including induction, hazard-specific training, and emergency response. And training records must show who was trained, when, on what, and with competency verification. A document control procedure must cover HSE documents, and communication procedure must describe how HSE information is shared, including through toolbox talks, notice boards, meetings, and digital platforms, and evidence of workers' consultation mechanisms, including HSE committee meetings, suggestions, systems, and incident reporting. Then you will move to operational review for occupational health and safety controls. That will take around 1 to 2 hours as well. The auditors here will check operational controls are controls documented for significant hazards. They will check emergency response plans. Do they cover relevant emergencies? And are procedures detailed enough to ensure worker safety? And how to pass here? Your operational controls must be documented for all significant hazards identified in risk assessment. And control describes what is done, who does it, when, how, and what records are kept. And emergency response plans must cover fire evacuation, including customer evacuation, and earthquake response, for example, in New Zealand operation, and serious injury or medical emergency also must be covered in your plan, and customer aggression or violence also must be covered in your emergency response plan, and ammonia leak if applicable. And then your emergency drill schedule must be defined, for example, fire drill quarterly, and emergency contact numbers must be displayed, and first aid facilities and trained first aiders must be identified. For example, in New Zealand context, emergency plans must reference WorkSafe New Zealand guidelines. And for emergency reviews of environmental controls also will take 1 to 2 hours. The auditors here will check operational controls. Are controls documented for significant aspects? And environmental agency response, do you have plans for a spill or leak? And are procedures details enough to prevent environmental harm? And how to pass here? Operational controls must be documented for all significant environmental aspects, and controls must describe what is done, who does it, when, how, and what records are kept. An example of controls: emergency energy management, for example, equipment switch off procedures and efficiency equipment, and waste management, including segregation or recycling and compensation, and water conservation, including leak detection and efficient use, and refrigerant management, including leak detection and maintenance and qualified technicians. Then your environmental emergency response plans must cover chemical spills, refrigerant leaks, wastewater discharge incidents, and your spill kits must be located and staff must be trained. For example, in New Zealand context, the controls must be aligned with regional council consent conditions. Then you move to performance evaluation review that will take 1 to 2 hours. Auditors will check monitoring plans, what HSE KPIs do you track and how often, and compliance evaluations, how do you verify legal compliance, and internal audit programs, does it cover all HSE and EMS requirements annual, and management review, is it scheduled, what inputs are required, and how to pass here. Your occupational health and safety monitoring plans must list KPIs, including injury rate, near miss reports, hazard inspection completion, training completion, and drill completion. And your environmental monitoring plans KPIs, including waste volume, energy consumptions, water usage, recycling rates, and emission. And compliance evaluations procedures must describe how and when compliance is verified, for example, quarterly legal register review and annual compliance audits. And internal audit procedures must cover both standards, and audit schedule must show all H&S and EMS clauses covered over 12 months, and auditors' competence must be defined, including completed internal audits training, HSE knowledge, and management review procedure must list required inputs for both standards, and management review must be scheduled with the minimum of annual review. For improvement review that lasts for 30 minutes, the auditors check incident investigation, how do you investigate injuries and environmental incidents, and corrective actions procedures, does it include root cause analysis and continual improvements with evidence of system improvement do you have, and how to pass this. Your incident investigation procedures must describe process for investigating injuries, near miss, and environmental incidents, and investigations must include root cause analysis, such as with 5Y or fishbone or similar, and corrective actions procedures must show, starting from issues being identified, then issues being contained, then issues being investigated for the root cause, and then implementation of action plan, and verification of effectiveness, and update the system in that sequence. And evidence of continual improvements must be present, including hazard elimination projects and waste reduction initiatives. And then you will have closing meeting that will last for 30 minutes. Auditors will present the findings, either confirm readiness for stage 2 or identify gaps requires corrections before stage 2. The common stage 1 failures and how to avoid them. First, you have first failure. Hazard register is when it's generic, with only office hazards. To fix this, you need to include all the retail and food service specific hazards listed above there. Second failure, when environmental aspects don't reflect actual operations. To fix this, you need to walk through your operations and identify actual waste and energy and water use. And other type of failure is legal register incomplete. To fix this, you need to use legislations. For example, you need to use government website and regional council website to identify all applicable laws. The other type of failure is when you don't have evidence of workers' consultations. To fix this, you need your health and safety committee must meet regularly with documented minutes. Other type of failure is when risk assessments don't use hierarchy of controls. To fix this, always consider elimination first, then work down the hierarchy. Other type of failure, common failure, is objectives not linked to significant hazards or aspects. To fix this, each objectives must address a significant hazard or environmental aspects. The other type of failure is emergency plans don't cover retail specific scenario. To fix this, you need to include customer evacuations and customer aggressions and peak period emergencies. The other type of failures when you don't have evidence of compliance evaluation, and to fix this, you need to schedule quarterly legal compliance review with documented results. Now you have pre-stage 1 checklist, and you can use this 2 weeks. The following is a pre-stage 1 checklist. You can use it 2 weeks before the audit to make sure you are prepared 100% with 0 gaps. And tick all the boxes. First, scope statements must be approved for both standards. Your occupational health and safety environmental policies must be approved and dated and displayed. And context analysis must be completed within 12 months. And interested parties registers must be complete. And process maps shows hazards and environmental aspects. Hazard register must be complete with all the details or with all retail and food service hazards. Risk assessment must be completed using hierarchy of controls. Environmental aspects register must be complete with significant evaluation. Legal register must be updated within 6 months. Compliance status must be tracked. All permits and consents must be identified and current. All objectives must be SMART with action plans. Health and Safety Committee must be established with recent meeting minutes. And workers' representations must be elected as per the local guidelines. And competence requirements must be defined for HSE roles. And HSE training records must be current. And document controls procedures must cover HSE documents. And communication procedures must be documented. And operational controls must be documented for significant hazards and aspects. And emergency response plans must be documented for all the relevant scenarios. An emergency drill schedule must be defined. And environmental emergency response plans must be documented. And monitoring plan with KPIs must be defined for both standards. And compliance evaluations procedures must be documented. And internal audit procedures must cover both standards. And audit schedule must cover all the requirements over 12 months. And management review procedures must be documented. And management review must be scheduled. An incident investigation procedure must be documented. And corrective actions procedures must be documented. And top management and health and safety committee representatives must be briefed and available. Stage 1 success indicators. Auditors confirm systems are ready for stage 2 and 0 major non-conformances, and any minor non-conformances are documentation gaps only, and stage 2 audit is scheduled. So what happened after stage 1? Current any identified gaps, correct any identified gaps, and typically will take you around 2 to 4 weeks. And submit evidence of corrective actions to the auditor, and stage 2 audit will be scheduled typically between 4 to 8 weeks after stage 1. That is a complete, let me come back here. This is a complete pass for stage 1. Everything you need here. Not only pass for stage 1, but you can maintain excellence of documentations here if you follow everything. Okay. Now we're going to move to stage 2 audit with complete pass guide. And what stage 2 really verifies here? Stage 2 is the operational implementation audit, where auditors verify that your occupational health and safety and environmental management systems actually work in practice during real service conditions. All right. For retail and food service, this means auditors will observe during peak periods and verify controls are functioning under pressure and test emergency response readiness in live customer environment. So in stage 2, you start with opening meeting expectations. Auditors will confirm stage 1 action clause and reviews evidence. And auditors will review operational schedule to plan observations during peak service periods and confirm key operational personnel available for observation and interview. Example, in New Zealand context, auditor will plan to observe lunch rush, evening service, and waste management procedures during busy trading hours. So how to pass this? You need to have documented evidence of all the stage 1 non-conformance being effectively addressed and closed out. Then you need to provide a clear schedule of operations, highlighting peak service times for auditor planning. And you need to ensure all relevant operational managers and staff are aware of the audit and available for observations or interview. And then there will be a floor observation focus. Auditor will observe actual behavior during service period across various departments, in the kitchen, front of the house, storage, and cleaning. An auditor will verify hazard controls functions in practice, for example, slip preventions on wet floors, correct manual handling techniques, hard surface protection during cooking. And auditors will check environmental controls in actions, for example, waste segregation at source, correct use of energy efficient equipment, and proper chemical storage in food areas. And auditors will interview staff at all levels about their understanding of HSE procedures, policies, and their roles. Examples in New Zealand context, auditors will observe compliance with WorkSafe New Zealand guidelines during peak service, noting staff engagement in hazard reporting. So how to pass it here? Your staff must consistently follow established procedures, especially during busy periods without prompting. And you need to ensure all hazards and environmental controls are visible, well maintained, and actively used. And staff should be able to articulate the importance of HSE procedures and their roles in maintaining them, not just follow instructions. And then documentation verifications in stage 2. Auditors will verify that hazard register accurately reflect actual operations and correct risks or current risks. An environmental aspects assessment must be accurate and reflect current operational impacts and controls. Risk assessment are current, relevant, and effectively control identified hazards. Legal compliance controls are maintained, regularly reviewed, and demonstrate ongoing adherence to requirements. Training records demonstrate competence for a specific task or role, especially for high activities. And for example, in New Zealand, auditors verifies compliance with HSWA 2015, RMA 1991, and Regional Council consent through records and observation. So you need also to cross-check with your applicable standards and regulations and jurisdictions. And how to pass the documentation verification. You need to ensure all documentations, especially hazard registers and aspect assessments, are living documents, regularly reviewed and updated to reflect current operations. You need to have readily accessible evidence of legal compliance reviews and any necessary permits or licenses. And your staff trainings records should be complete, up to date and aligned with job roles and risks. And then for emergency response testing, auditors may verbally test emergency response knowledge of various staff members and will verify emergency equipment accessible and conditions that emergency equipment are accessibly and in good condition, such as fire extinguishers, first aid kits, and spill kits. And auditors will check emergency drill records and staff awareness of procedures and roles. And auditors will confirm incident reporting procedures are understood and followed. And for example, in New Zealand context, auditors will test earthquake response procedures with the staff and checks spill response readiness in the kitchen or storage area. And auditors might do similar practice based on your location. And how to pass? You need to conduct regular emergency drills and debriefing and ensure all the staff are aware of their roles and responsibilities. Ensure emergency equipment is easily accessible, clearly marked, and regularly inspected. Staff should be able to clearly describe what to do in various emergency scenarios and how to report incidents. The critical success factors: staff can explain why controls exist and how they contribute to safety and environmental protection, not just what they do. And controls functions effectively during busy periods and under pressure, demonstrating inherent robustness, not just supervision-dependent compliance. Incidents are investigated for root causes leading to systematic improvement and not just logged and forgotten. And management demonstrates visible and active commitment to safety and environmental through regular presence, communication, and resources allocation. And continuous improvement is evident through implemented actions, updated procedures, and positive change in HSE performance. The common stage 2 findings: hazard controls are not consistently maintained or implemented during peak periods, leading to increased risk, or staff are unaware of specific emergency procedures, their roles, or the location of emergency equipment, or environmental monitoring records such as waste weights and energy usage are incomplete, inconsistent, or not analyzed, and legal compliance is not verified regularly, or change in legislations are not incorporated into the system, and corrective actions address symptoms rather than root causes, leading to recurring issues. Those are common stage 2 findings that you should take notes and try to avoid them. Now let's look at HSE excellence signals. We have excellence in HSE is characterized by proactive risk management, visible leadership, and staff who intervene when they observe unsafe practice, even during busy service periods. You have staff intervenes in unsafe act is a signal of excellence in HSE. When staff remind each other about wet floors, supervisors stop unsafe knife handling immediately, and team members speak up about sleep hazards without fear of blame. Those are examples of excellence signals in HSE. So strive for that. And waste reductions is tracked when food waste measured and analyzed, when reduction initiatives are implemented based on data, when staff engage in waste minimization and results are visible and celebrated. Those are the signals of excellence in HSE. And also supervisors lead by examples when managers follow the same safety procedures as staff and leaders are visible during busy periods, and supervisors participate in cleaning and waste segregation, and safety is never compromised for speed, those are indicators of excellence of HSE. So make sure you strive for excellence. Now that is part 2, HSE. In part 3, we are going to cover food safety with ISO 22000. So thank you and all the best. I know if you follow everything we highlight, you will achieve your certification with 0. And I'm telling you, with 0 findings, 0 non-conformance. If you follow everything we said and you apply it, you tailor it to your location and your operations. All the best and see you next.